Hello, and welcome to another daily dose from the Chris McPherson Show. I'm Chris McPherson, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe on our YouTube. You can hit the button down below, hit that bell as well, and that way you get a notification every time we drop another episode into your feed to keep you up to date with all the black and white of your sporting landscape. No grey opinions. And of course, if you want to keep up to date in between episodes, you can give us a follow across on our social media channels. You'll find us on TikTok, on X, on Facebook, and on Instagram. At the Chris Mack Show is where you can find us. There is plenty more rugby and other sporting stories and content coming your way on those channels. Today, though, it is all about the Bledisloe Cup clash at Eden Park. The takeaways, the immediate reaction to the All Blacks and the Wallabies. And as the Bledisloe often does, it delivered a roller coaster with plenty of drama, emotion, and action. Let's start with the finish. The final score was the All Blacks winning 33 to the Wallabies 24. On paper, it's a pretty straightforward story. Another win for New Zealand at their fortress Eden Park. But this story, it had much, much more to it. Australia clawed their way back into the contest. They even had the margin within a single score late in the game. But lapses in discipline, shaky defence early, and some contentious refereeing decisions ultimately kept them from ending a 39-year drought at Eden Park and extended the All Blacks' reign there in Auckland against all comers to 52 tests, a phenomenal record. It is an absolute fortress. In terms of the game, let's start with the standout. For the All Blacks, it was Cam Roigard, their number 9, their scrum half. His second try late in the match, when the Wallabies were down to 14 men, was the decisive strike that made the margin 9. But his influence went far beyond that moment. He dictated tempo, spotted space, and handled the pressure with poise. He stood up and led his country. He was in everything, and his brace of tries went a long way to securing the win and retaining the Bledisloe for New Zealand. In a match full of momentum swings, he was the steadying force that allowed the All Blacks to finish the job, staying calm, composed, and clinical throughout his stint that was just shy of 80 minutes in the end. On the counter side of the coin, it was far from complete doom and gloom for the Wallabies. Despite another loss and leaving the Bledisloe in New Zealand, there were bright spots. Harry Wilson, their captain, was exceptional, aggressive in contact, forcing turnovers and consistently bending the line. His leadership's been exceptional since he stepped into the captaincy, and today it was no different, leading by example. He was hard done by when he was penalised for a grass-cutting tackle mid-match, which otherwise may well have been a momentum shifter for the Wallabies. He was a star, and he stands out for them each and every game, leading by example. Another of the loose forwards, Tom Hooper, was tireless. His work rate, both sides of the ball, were a cornerstone for this team. He consistently got across the advantage line and bent the defensive line as well. He was also a key cog alongside fellow flanker Fraser McWright in elements of the Wallabies' scrambled defence. He was impressive, that is for sure. In the back line, Lenny Katau, he was probably the best of the Aussie backs. Carting plenty of ball forwards and looking dangerous most times he ran. He set up one try. He laid the platform for the Wallabies first with a barnstorming run. However, his penchant for going on his own did bite him a little later in the game, with a key turnover after he decided to pick and go when the Wallabies were on the front foot, but with no support. Wallabies winger Harry Potter, the winger with the most famous crossover name, the Man of Magic, was busy. He was involved in plenty and scored a good try, was carting the ball up at stages like he thought he was a loose forward, and his impact certainly looked as much the same. He was impressive with the only mark against his name, the yellow card, that happened late in the game and saw him not finish on the field. Again, though, many thought that was a 50-50 call, and we'll talk a little bit more about the officiating in a moment, because that was certainly something that brought many to ire. Social media was active with it. Again, though, that was all Gold fans. Last but not least for the Wallabies, James Slipper. He brought up his 150th Wallabies test, the first man to do so, a huge occasion, and further solidifying him as not only Australia's most capped test player, but the third most capped test player of all time. Now just 3 tests behind Sam Whitelock, the All Black legend, and a massive 20 matches still behind Welsh second rower Alan Wynne-Jones, who leads the pack with 170. Slipper was a rocket out of the line in defence and pulled off some strong, bone-jarring hits early when the Wallabies were on the back foot, starting to turn that momentum. As always, he was impactful through his minutes and led well in the set piece. In terms of the Wallabies, though, discipline was the biggest talking point. Execution also their undoing. Key missed kicks for touch from penalties, 3 in all from James O'Connell, were tough to see. The third of those was another potential sliding doors moment as Australia knocked on the door and tried to ramp up their pressure late, but the turnover was forced when touch wasn't found and the All Blacks pushed back. Penalties at key times handed New Zealand field position and points in key moments. And of course, the late yellow card that we touched on for Harry Potter, as contentious as it may be, it was called, and the referee's call always ends up being right. You cannot give the All Blacks, though, repeated opportunities and expect to survive. It's an area this Wallabies side must address. They did the same last game against Argentina, and if they want to turn competitive performances into actual victories, they need to be better, especially against the top nations. That all said, there were certainly some significant voices who queried some of the officiating, as I alluded to. Italian referee Andrea Piatti made several very tight calls and didn't make a couple of others, including what appeared to be a fairly clear-cut lifting tackle during the second half. And more often than not, these decisions appeared to go against the Wallabies at maybe my gold eye coming out. It wasn't the sole reason for the results, certainly. The Wallabies have a lot to answer for, but it certainly didn't help. And former Wallaby Morgan Turinui let his feelings be known very, very clearly in commentary. Calling the referee out as being out of his depth at this level, it was blunt, emotional, and it certainly reflected the frustration of many Wallaby supporters watching on. The former Test star was scathing of Piatti, saying the Wallabies just need to take a breath here. They're in the fight. They've just got to be more accurate and not allow a referee that is not up to the occasion, that has been appointed by World Rugby in error, to take them out of the game. A very clear, a very strong, a very emotional statement from the former Wallabies great. Will there be a conversation to come from here? Most certainly. Will Turinui have an answer to deliver? More than likely. It'll be interesting to see what comes of it, but Piatti did certainly look a little short of some of the other referees that we've seen at this level, given the magnitude of the occasion in a huge Bledisloe match, which obviously came down to the wire. Defensively for the Wallabies, it was a mixed night. They did scramble with real desperation at times. We saw late in the game them fending off up to 10 phases from the All Blacks deep in defensive territory. They produced some excellent last-ditch efforts as well. But that early period where the line was porous, it allowed New Zealand to build their lead with those couple of early tries. And it was a lead that couldn't be clawed back by the Aussies in Auckland and went a long way to determining another retention of the Bledisloe for the All Blacks. It was a match of fine margins, and conceding those early points was critical and furthered the case that not only are the Wallabies often slow starters, they are a brilliant 60-odd minute team at this stage and need to build that into a more complete performance. So the All Blacks extend their winning streak at Eden Park with a 33-24 result. Cam Roigard confirms himself as one of the top nines in the world. He controlled it all. He pulled the strings in this key Bledisloe victory. While the Wallabies were once again left to rue discipline, poor execution and defence. But there were plenty of positives to look at, as we said. We didn't even mention the solid performance of Max Jorgensen at 15. But for the Wallabies, it's just about nailing that start and getting those 1%ers right, fixing the discipline, and taking it all to Perth next week. The refereeing and Morgan Turinui's on-air reaction will undoubtedly spark plenty of debate and fuel the social media conversations for a couple of days to come. But the bigger picture is clear. Australian fans do have some reasons to be positive. 2 years out from a home World Cup, and they are closing the gap, the Wallabies, on the top teams, yet there is still small margins and those little areas that separate them from beating New Zealand at their fortress, and the Bledisloe will now stay in the land of the long white cloud. But for now, all eyes will turn to Perth next Saturday as the Rugby Championship and Bledisloe come to their crescendo. We look forward to seeing what comes of the remaining games. Don't forget that South Africa and Argentina will be clashing twice more as well, including the early hours of Sunday morning our time this week. That's all for today's Daily Dose, but don't forget to hit the subscribe down below. Hit that bell as well to get those notifications. I'm Chris McPherson. Thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you again soon here on The Chris McPherson Show for another Daily Dose and much, much more.